where the traffic is. This is also where the traffic is. There's traffic here too. Being Spider-Man is so easy.
I thought Into the Spider-Verse was the movie of the last decade. Released in 2018, it is the best movie from the 2010s. And Across the Spider-Verse just blew it out of the water. It is the movie of the decade. Again, the best movie of the 2020s. Though to be fair, there is some steep competition. Everything Everywhere All at Once, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, Spider-Man: No Way Home, Tenet. But I mean, this animation is just beyond cinema at this point. This is the future of animation, just like how last time was. And they're only just catching up now. And during the time of the AI artistic takeover, I think a movie like this is just what we needed to really present the upper boundaries of art that AI surely cannot overcome. I mean, every frame of Into the Spider-Verse was like a comic strip, but every frame of Across the Spider-Verse was literally a painting. And that's just from Gwen's universe.
Wanna get out of here?
Wherever you go from here, you have to promise to take care of that little boy.
Oh, this movie was so good. I feel like I want to make a scene that changed Across the Spider-Verse and then just make an ungodly marathon video that just breaks down every single scene. The way that Gwen's universe is depicted like a watercolor mood board, where there was no need for consistency in coloring between shots, as it was entirely the emotions of any given beat that was directing the palette of the shots. Every single shot with Captain Stacy being this immaculate pose that sometimes feels like a legit comic book panel with Gwen sharing the frame, and other times just an undisputable piece of artwork you'd see in some kind of pompous museum. I was in love with this movie from the very first sequence of events, and that alone was just the tip of the iceberg. The way that the beginning of the whole movie is a cacophonistic sensory overload of drums and foreshadowing to feature details like Miguel watching Miles and that number 42 spider bite. I had to watch this movie 2 times just to be able to soak in some of it. And I'm certain there were still 1,000,001 pieces I missed. But though I've clearly already started my gushing ramble about this movie, my first impression to this movie wasn't actually quite as savory as I stand now. See, my first cinema viewing was a bit of a disaster, to be fair. I watched this movie on release date, public release date. One day I'll get into this bigwig movie premiere. And my cinema was absolutely packed out. Fantastic. My 2 greatest cinema experiences of all time were with packed out theaters, and the just unbridled exasperation from the group whooping at every reveal, gasping at every twist, and cheering at every victory. You know, like the glory days of Infinity War, or the other glory days of Spider-Man: No Way Home. It's mostly Marvel fans, okay? It's the Marvel fans that are the source of my happiest cinema memories. So picture my excitement to be in a room full of all of them again for what is undoubtedly going to be a spectacle to which none of us would ever be prepared for. The movie rolls in, jokes are told, and nobody laughs. Gwen has a whole artistic quip with the line, "You call this art? Well, we're talking about it, aren't we?" And the only sound in the cinema is my nose exhaling out of shyness to purport anything else. Out of my face, not out of my nose. Jump ahead like 90 minutes and my personal favorite joke pops up with Peter parked car, and still nary a whisper from the entire crowd. Ugh, and then it gets worse. The guy next to me, literally the guy sat directly next to me. I went to this cinema screening alone, so I bunched up between 2 complete strangers here. Starts blustering and snorting, sneezing every 5 seconds, I kid you not. From the moment that Miles starts taking a very vertical ride to the very end of the movie. That's like the best 30 minutes of the movie, the climactic ending of it all, and here I am, completely unimmersed, as this pack of friends offer no help to this clearly suffering guy, and I'm the only one even willing to give the guy a bottle of water to clear his troubles briefly. I noticed what happens towards the final arc, but it just didn't impact me as it should. I wasn't beady-eyed into the final fight scene, so it didn't feel as grand the first time around. So I came out of that first screening thinking to myself, yeah, it's a good film, but I wouldn't exactly say it's better than the first movie. I'm seeing a lot of over-the-top reviews, and I think it's just a bunch of recency bias. Surely, right? But now here I stand on the same page as most of them too, because I just needed to watch it again. This time with just a fraction of the crowd, but far more receptive verbally. Much better. Plus this time I can spot some extra details having known all the context of what's coming up. And it's just a boundary-breaking piece of art. We are supposed to be the good guys.
We are.
But let's let's not just go straight to the final act, let's pull back a little bit. Renaissance Vulture! Immediately just the Sony team flexing on all of us with this incredibly detailed piece of animation. Entirely pencil sketch in design, sometimes 2D on physical paper and other times 3D realized with paper textures. His reveal was literally like one of those Sakuga shots in anime that just for no reason suddenly explodes in animation prowess to just make you go, wow, this is an intense moment. So immaculately done and such a great opening to the reality-breaking reality that this movie is to dive into. It's why it's the scene that changed across the Spider-Verse. And looking the second time around, there's all sorts of other animation styles plugged in there that can kind of go over your head. Miles animated within his comic book strip on his reintroduction. One of those things you kind of don't count as it's a montage on the side rather than what's actually happening in real time, but it's there. And Miguel's intro too, so comic-y as he watches himself handle a child he never had. And that's not even touching on the most stark example of them all, Hobie Brown. Oh, what a gem of a character. I really thought Spider-Man India Pavita Prabhakar was going to be my favorite character, with his naive optimism and slightly obnoxious personality. But no, Mr. Brit himself, Spider-Punk, just blew away every single scene he was in. No wonder he left early. Animated like anarchical strips of paper and news articles, he switches between like 5 different textures with no consistency between shots. He doesn't believe in consistencies. Not to mention his different body parts animate in different ways. His body's on 3s, his vest is on offset 3s, his outlines are on 2s, and his guitar does something else as well. This guy couldn't not be my favorite, and not just because he's British in it. Everything about him was just brilliant, and I especially love, particularly when watching the second time around, all of the events of the conflict were fully planned and orchestrated by Hobie. Think it through. This guy hates authority and the system, right? So he would have always hated the idea of Miguel's Spider Society. It's never been his thing, and it of course want to tear it down. Every Spider-Man is involved in this system apart from the one guy, Miles Morales, which everyone has already been given the lowdown of. You can imagine that the reason Hobie Brown was even about up to this point anyway was for his ulterior motive. Sure, he says it's because he's been looking out for his drummer, but maybe instead it was because of Miles himself, knowing that one day he would get involved, probably through the antics of his drummer, and that this Miles character is the very guy who would bring down this entire system. So in he crashes onto the scene with his guitar part animating on different frames to the rest of his body, because he's just inconsistent like that. Not there as the third member of some love triangle, that would be far too cliche and annoying to have to deal with, far too corporate for this anarchist. But immediately as a direct ally to Miles, even if the boy needs to get over his own personal biases and jealousies first. Immediately, Hobie teaches him an upgrade for his electro-absorption ability to use his entire palm, not just his fingertips. Then, entering into Miguel's lair for Miles' first interaction, he's there nabbing all sorts of parts as he goes. He's a kleptomaniac, a sort of typical thing you'd expect him to do. But also, what does he say in this very same walk-in with Miles? Build your own watch. And also trying to convince him not to fully follow through on this arrangement as it unveils in front of him. Don't join the war until you know what you're up against, or something like that. Already he's anti-establishment and trying to get Miles to think the same. Fast forward again to when Miles is inevitably captured by Miguel in a way that anybody, not just the Spider-Man, can predict. And what does Hobie remind Miles? That very same palm fingertip hint. He always knew that Miles would be caught, and he knew the tech that would be used for it. Hence, he brought out an ability that Miles could specifically use to break through and wreak havoc. And with that pin dropped, he quits, never really wanting to be part of it in the first place. He then leaves his watch behind so he can't be tracked, and follows his own advice to make your own watch. How? By using the very pieces he grabbed along the way at Miguel's headquarters. Boom! Drop it off in Gwen's universe, this time coming with its own flair of newsletter imagery, and starting the foundation of the uprising against the system Hobie Brown was designed to always go against. Bang! I need that pen. And I can only love the character even more after that realization. Or at the very least, that's my personal headcanon on the whole idea. Spider-Man Noir being colorblind still makes him a close second favorite of mine, and Peter Parker, obvious third. Don't at me.
I don't think I want this costume anymore.
But speaking of headcanons, there's another one that's been making its rounds that I feel is a great piece of literature layering. The the connection between Spider-Gwen and the trans community. In the background of Gwen's universe, you can spot two trans flags. One easy to catch above her doorframe in her room, and the other on Captain Stacy's uniform. A very strong choice of representation there that I just adore was included. There's also a Black Lives Matter sticker on Miles' bag. Of course, the internet wants to argue over the question of whether Gwen is a trans ally with her Protect Trans Lives flag, or is in fact trans herself, considering her father is wearing the direct flag on his persons, which suggests something a lot more personal and direct, whilst others just say it's the colour palette of her suit and universe. This doesn't need to be a heated debate, but hey, it's some progressive politics placed into a movie all about inclusion and diversity. So just take it in as up to interpretation. I don't think one opinion needs to necessarily override the other, just enjoy whichever version of truth brings you more satisfaction and joy. The entire world is fictional anyway, and all art is subjective. So make it the best version in your head, whichever way that may be. I just think it's very cool to be included at all. It's like art. You call this art? Well, we're talking about it, aren't we? See, if I actually had the footage from this movie, I would integrate this quote directly in, but for now you just have to deal with me verbalizing these clips in these early days. While we're back in Gwen's universe, I have to also mention the latter conversation with her dad and how brilliantly that all ties together, as her mood ring background only goes further with dripping effects and the like going on to add more to that tear-jerky nature of their emotive conversation. Such an interesting display of expression that I don't think I've really seen anywhere else. You also have Captain Stacy slowly dipping into darker and darker backgrounds before being pulled right out of it by the end with a hug from Gwen that turns their entire apartment blanket white. Mwah. Plus some other things like Gwen's mask eyes popping up occasionally in the background of their conversations too. Maybe this is the scene that changed Spider-Verse, honestly. After all, the trans allegory continues further than just a couple of flags, as the entire dialogue between her and her father can be connected to the same kind of conversations told from a trans person coming out to their parent or guardian sometimes. With lines like, "What, are you still afraid of me?" really hitting hard with that context in mind the second time around. Masterful writing all around. I need to find more words for immaculate in the thesaurus.
Yeah.
For years, I've been taking care of this little boy.
Hey, thank you for making it at least halfway into this video. Subscribe if you're not already. Loads of new movies are coming out this summer, and it's like a real golden age of cinema and animation. I'll be keeping up with their releases, so stick around if you'd like to see more. Alright, bye. Though, other than my first cinema experience, there was another issue I feel should be addressed about this movie, and that was audio issues. Yes, I had them too. Though my issues weren't with Gwen's universe or Hobie Brown's British idioms or anything, funnily enough, mine all spouted from Mumbattan. It was Spider-Man India's lines I kept missing. I lost it over the traffic lines, all the Spider-Men quipping along, and the whole exchange at Alchemax about jumpers. I caught it all the second time around, but I'm not sure if it was because I'd been catching some subtitled versions over on TikTok in between viewings, or because I was in a slightly different cinema screen. To me though, it seemed more like an audio mixing issue, as the Mumbattan music just seemed a little bit too loud to catch all of the quips on the side that are meant to be the forefront of comedy in any action sequence. Ah well, I got it all the second time. Watch this movie again if you haven't already. You might think you soaked it all in, but trust me, you didn't. There's also more theming beats to catch, like with the counselor lady near the early days of the movie, talking about how Miles, as a universe, is a blank piece of paper. She doesn't know the kid directly, so she has nothing of note on him. But it's also thematic, of course, to his root of the canon, being a totally blank page of potential, potentially, due to the anomalical nature of his existence as Spider-Man in the first place. Not to mention her bringing up the comment that you can't have your cake and eat it too. Very much mimicking the thematic idea that you can't be Spider-Man and not have to face sacrifices along the way. Not just referring to the fate of a nearby captain to Spider-Man, but also the relationship consequences with a Gwen too, to which Miles still seems clearly steadfast to tackle anyway. He even has a direct response to that cake comment with, "Not if you have two cakes," which could very well lead into the revolution to Beyond the Spider-Verse. 'Cause yes, this movie is a two-parter. This was spoiled for me just before I came into the screening. Some dickbag on Twitter thought 5 slashes in a tweet counts to avoid spoilers. And it's the one spoiler I really wish I had never caught. Just another beat in ruining my final 30 minutes from that first screening. Although I also got spoiled that Spot is the guy that got hit with the bagel, but I can let that one slide. Though in hindsight, I really like this choice, so as to tell a much bigger picture and story rather than crushing it down to just 2 hours and 20 minutes. God, really? Like 200,000 plus frames? And yet it felt incredibly short, both times. Incredible that they managed to do that. I've always wanted 90-minute movies to be longer, so hell, why not 160-minute movies too? Of course this would be another Spider-Man trilogy, though I'm low-key mad at myself for not spotting that now obvious plot point of Miles' spider from the first movie. It's so clear that it was glitching, and it means something to be glitching. I just always thought it was some multi-dimensional spider from my first blind reaction, but no! I totally should have foreseen that this would cause complications for Miles. I watched this movie many times! It's also really interesting to see that there are no other Miles Morales Spider-Men across the Spider-Verse, as if to say he's really not the intended recipient. No universe has multiple Spider-Men unless you count Mayday now, so for a universe to have 2 only here, of course, means something. We just assumed it was normal because that's the usual Miles Morales story. But this could easily predate all of those on a multiversal level. Like, they specifically could have shown Miles Morales from the PlayStation game, but they didn't. Just Peter Parker.
Welcome to the Spider Society.
I'm Spider-Man.
Oh, no way. All of us are.
Ironic as well that Miles is the one being spouted at as the Spider-Man who doesn't belong, considering the leader of the opposition is Miguel O'Hara, who he himself admits is not really the same as the others. I haven't read his comics, but from the movie alone I can tell he is a sort of vampire werewolf type goth who has to manually inject himself with spider bite in order to keep himself active, and he has no spider sense, as shown from him being bashed away by the Vulture in Gwen's universe. All of his power comes from tech. He's the least Spider-Man of them all, including Peter Park's car. But still, a very compelling character all in all. Mayday was cute, as much as I wasn't focusing on her too much, since she was pretty much always a distraction for the plot rather than upholding it. Though I do love how her spidey sense kicked in towards the end to point Peter B. Parker towards Gwen at the end of the movie. You could just tell it is all instinct and an unnatural sense of intelligence in those shocked eyes of hers. And Peter B. Parker's whole bit of being a constant parent, I actually didn't like at first, but it grew on me the second time around. It's especially nice that he decided to have her in the first place after seeing Miles as a kind of child figure he would love to replicate in the long run. And Mayday putting on her Spider-Man beanie at the end felt like a proper Incredibles ending moment. I think it was also the right choice to leave the last movie's 3 external Spider-Men off to the side. Not only for budgeting reasons for the likes of Nicolas Cage and John Mulaney, but I think it would have taken something away to have them involved so closely alongside trying to introduce this new team. Their timing was perfect for being part of the final part, and I'm really glad with the new group we ended up with. The live action interactions were great. I didn't pick up that the first lady Spot goes up to is the lady from the Venom universe, but it was fun all the same. Of course he takes a gum called Venom Mint. And the use of Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire footage in the retelling of Spider-Man's story was a great use of a cameo. Shame Tom Holland only got a mention verbally, but it's fine. Gives them more use for him in the future if they wanted to. Strange how only his universe seems to have a Doctor Strange and the Avengers at all, but I kinda like keeping the two separate. And not just because it's a contrast between 2 different studios. And then there was Donald Glover. I'm sure you've seen the endless retellings of Donald Glover's connections to Miles Morales as a character over the last 12 years, but seeing him in live action form as a Prowler is just so good and fun to see. Though I also totally want to see him in action in Holland's universe. Or heck, maybe it's the rebooted Andrew Garfield one. Come on, we're all manifesting that concept still, right? And if we're not getting that, hey, at least maybe there's the Lego Spider-Man universe. I love that this was animated by a passionate 14-year-old fan. I hope that's real.
All stations, stop Spider-Man. You?
And then there were the final twists of the movie. You should be long gone if you're trying to avoid spoilers. Again, I'm mad at myself for not spotting it earlier, but I was super distracted by the man who was 80% snot next to me, okay? Miles Morales taken back by his DNA to Earth 42. Different to his actual home universe of 1610. They even established it towards you a handful of times with a title card, Hobie calling him by his number, and probably a third time somewhere along the runtime. Of course there's a mismatch of circumstance there. And of course, they're gonna play around with the existence of Uncle Aaron. Why, with so many Spider-Men being played with, didn't we think of an alternative version of the home-based characters? Just very cool all around. And the reveal that Miles' dad is the one to be taken out instead, it just makes me want them to have like a multi-dimensional portal with uncle and dad staring at each other across the portal. Give us some trans-dimensional emotional weight between people that would otherwise never get the opportunity. That's the fan service I want. And then, of course, we have alternate dimension Earth 42 Miles Morales. Of course, with a dead father, he would of course be much closer to his Spanish influences from his mother. This Miles didn't get a B+ in Spanish, though every Spider-Man gets a B+ in something. Gwen gets hers in English. This Miles turns out to become the Prowler. Miles Prowler. Not to be confused with Tails, Miles Prowler, which for some reason I keep doing every time I say Miles Prowler out loud. Makes sense. In a universe with no Spider-Man and an uncle with criminal undertones, logically the young boy would fall into the same rabbit hole. You can even spot a sketch of some Prowler claws in Miles 42's bedroom. It's just like the Doc Ock reveal. Perhaps our Miles was meant to be the Prowler eventually. If his Peter Parker lived and killed Uncle Aaron, our Miles Morales could have taken up the mantle himself. Yet at the same time, surely with canon events being disrupted majorly between both universes, they would both have completely imploded by now. Unless Miguel's theory of canon is entirely false, and something else removed his beloved universe. All these things simply don't apply to Miles Morales'. They're not attached to the web of life and destiny. I don't know. I haven't got a Scooby-Doo, mate. Although it is a cool detail that you can spot Miles 42 early inside of Spot's ramblings at one point when he talks about taking away the spider. Clearly intended for Miles and not necessarily that universe's Peter Parker. Perhaps it's because their fates were switched entirely that things are still intact. After all, the Spidey sense around our Miles the first time was purple and green, Prowler colors, and the colors in front of Miles 42 for the first time are red and blue, Spider-Man colors. Though I must say, the lead up to this reveal of dimensional screwery was done beautifully catching it properly the second time. Cross-cutting perfectly between Gwen in 1016 clearing the path for Miles, only for him to get in flawlessly anyway since the entire villainous team have chased him to the wrong dimension. This is the real scene that changed across the Spider-Verse, for how well it throws you through a loop and tells a whole new ending to the Spider-Man identity reveal with a clueless Rio. Leaving us now with a battle between the Mileses, a universe with no Spider-Man at all, a brewing chase of every Spider-Man in the same universe, a conflict of fate and foresight, an alliance of defying Spider-Men, and a freak of the week turned godly supervillain. Spot was great, fun at first, I love his doofy bow-leggedness with some actually great superpowers and now a multiversal thread of brilliance. I just wish he didn't sound so much like Ryan Reynolds in action scenes. Something about that tone just took me out of it sometimes. Funny that twice now the source of our trans-dimensional cacophony of multiversal storytelling can all be sourced back to a bagel. Strange that it happened twice. Must be a lot of bagels in writers' rooms in Hollywood or something.
For a Dalmatian, I am the Spot. It's not funny.
With so many little details to point out beyond just the names of all the Spider-Men and the different scenes to break down, I'm tempted this December to whip out a marathon project depicting every animation flourish this entire movie slips out for it literal frames at a time. From the comic paneling pauses and action lines to the very first flare of the entire movie, a cough in the lower right corner. I'll be working on that for the next 7 months, I imagine, so sit back and watch this movie again while I stitch something together. For now, that's all my gushing thoughts on the matter of Spider-Man across the Spider-Verse. I don't know how you're meant to top that pristine edition, but Lord & Miller production label slapped on the start makes me think it's absolutely possible. And I wouldn't want to miss it for the world, in any reality. For now, my name's been Daz. You didn't really care. Wait, one question. There was a part in Miguel's retelling of his universe imploding that Peter B. Parker was next to him in that moment. Is he involved in that backstory, or was this before even the original multiversal thing started? Is it just because they're both parents that he understands him? Anyway, I'll see you in a bit.
How my story is supposed to go. Nah, I'm gonna do my own thing.